the defense. That's what was going to win the Raptors some games. But right now, the defense has just been terrible. The Sixers have shot better than 50% from the field in both games, better than 40% from three, shooting tons of free throws at a very high clip because they're a very good free throw shooting team. And the Raptors have simply not stopped the first option, the second option, the third option, or the fourth option, really. So that's why the Raptors are down in a 2-0 hole beyond anything else. And if the Raptors hope to get back into the series, which I think you and I both agree there still is a chance, but like in order to do that, they absolutely need to fix their defense. So, I mean, I guess I'll tell you right here, like, do you feel like they need to sort of like go back to the drawing board with how they're defending in the series?
A little bit. I think we need to, to kind of redesign it, we need to take a look at what hasn't worked, right? And obviously, you just said a lot of things, but there's a pretty big contrast between game one and game two in terms of what did and didn't work. And you can maybe take some encouragement from that in that game two, they at least forced turnovers. That is 0.1A on Raptors game plan against just about every team. And that's it's not just about the turnovers. They use turnovers and deflections and things like that as a proxy for, are you making the opponent uncomfortable on offense?
Yeah.
So the turnover number jumps from 3 to 14. That should be a positive. But we know that to force those turnovers, the Raptors are hyper aggressive. They're very, very aggressive. They're handsy.
That's true. Yep.
We've seen as much as Raptors, the team and the fan base and the players and the coach have complained about the whistle in this series. We've had games where the Raptors go up against good opponents earlier in the regular season, and those opponents are complaining about the whistle the Raptors get. Because basically the idea is, well, you can't call everything, and we're at a size disadvantage, so take your chances on being physical and being a little handsy. And usually that pays off with a lot of turnovers that fuel the transition game.
Yep.
Curiously, the Raptors offense has been fine in this series, and their half-court offense has actually been pretty good, especially by their own standards. They have not they forced more turnovers last game. They didn't turn those into transition offense, which is troubling because Philly's one of the worst transition defenses in the league. So that's one component that they moved in the right direction. I think probably the way we have to look at this is we start with Embiid, and I think you have to put out the first fire, to use the Jerry Stackhouse 905 term. And the first fire is always going to be Joel Embiid. He has been a monster through 2 games. He's got 50 points, 6 offensive rebounds, 4 assists, only 4 turnovers. And of course, he's taken 25 free throw attempts.
Oh, jeez.
So, I know. There are a couple things we can try to do differently with Embiid. And again, Nick Nurse thought game 2 was a little better. He had to work a little harder. And he shot a ton of free throws in the first quarter. But in general, they made life difficult for him. Couple turnovers, 0 assists. What do you want to do differently with Joel Embiid? Because a 7-footer isn't walking through the door.
Yeah, no, it's genuinely not. I think their defense against Embiid, at least their overall general strategy, has been okay. I actually wouldn't change too much about it. What's been really difficult is, number one, he's been like really active, especially moving off the ball. For him, like, so off the ball movement, we're always thinking about like a JJ Redick running around, sprinting, coming off screens, stuff like that, like a Klay Thompson, even Jordan Poole these days. Salute to Jordan Poole, by the way, Mike. That's what the Warriors needed, another guy who could shoot like that. Anyway,
he knocked Steph Curry to a bench roll.
It's unbelievable. But like, that's what we're thinking about with off-ball movement. But I think for a big like Embiid, his version of off-ball movement is like, okay, he'll give up the ball, but then he'll just keep attacking. He'll go from one side of the lane to the other. When he gives up the ball, he immediately starts to move, starts to get deeper post position. And, he's done such a good job of staying involved, hurting the Raptors, and that's why they keep fouling him. There's not too much you can do against that just because you don't have like a big enough guy to bump him and slow him down. It's not even tiring for him probably. But like, that's the only thing I would say. The Raptors, if they can do a better job, whether that's Kem, whether that's Precious, like just bumping him from their certain spots, I think that's the only real note I could say. Otherwise, he's not actually hurting you from his own individual scoring that much. In fact, I would almost prefer if he had the ball a little bit more because he's not creating as much out of his own attention as opposed to someone like James Harden, who, even though he hasn't scored well, has really done a good job distributing. So actually, I'm fairly okay with it. The thing with Embiid, you have to understand is, you're going to send him to the free throw line at least 10 times a game, like period. I know people are upset about the calls. Some of them are upsetting. The way he flops for them sometimes is like genuinely upsetting. Like, especially because you're actually legitimately having to foul him all the time. But then if he's also exaggerating, then it hurts even more. It's like, a rich person taking money from someone who's on the street. It's like that. But at the same time, that's just ultimately it's going to happen. But I think for the most part, they've actually done a decent enough job against Embiid. You just have to accept that he's like a force of nature. He's going to score this much on you.
Do you know how many free throws per game more he's averaging in this series than in the regular season?
Like 1?
0.7.
Oh, God.
This is what they do.
This is normal. Like, this is normal for him. Yeah.
And again, we both kind of went through the tape on this one, and there were, I think, 2 fouls Embiid got that stood out as, okay, that was a bad call. But for the most part, he has the ball a ton, and you have to be super physical with him because you don't have the size to match up.
Yep.
And there aren't a lot of options. Like you just laid out, Precious and Kem Birch have to do more, even though that's asking a lot of them, to make him fight for his positions, to push him out of the paint a little bit and make his catches come outside of the paint. Mm-hmm. But it's not like you can front the post entry passes to Joel Embiid because
by the way, he's done a really good job of, if you front him, he's going to give you a little push in the back. You're going to miss the catch, and then he's just going to dunk, or you're going to foul him again.
And the Raptors don't have the help defender coming over that can, no one can really come over and contest Joel Embiid in help defense. It's not like that guy doesn't exist,
sure,
but you can at least have length. You can have length or strength against him, and the Raptors don't really have that. So if you're, say, Kem Birch, and you front that, and it's Boucher sliding over to try to block it, like we saw what that looks like last night on that goaltend, kind of. It's like, okay, you can't get close enough to Embiid on a contest because you'll foul him. Mm-hmm. And so there just aren't a lot of good options. So I agree with you that for the most part, they've done a pretty good job on Embiid. My one area, and this isn't really a defensive design thing, it's an execution thing.
Yeah.
He has been able to seal in transition and semi-transition way, way, way too easily. He is beating the Raptors back down the floor a lot. Yep. And I don't know if that's I don't not know. I think it is a symptom of not making him work hard enough on defense. That's, you only have so many options about how do you attack a guy and who do you attack, because logically, why would you attack Joel Embiid, who's an annual Defensive Player of the Year candidate, when you have a James Harden on the floor or a Tyrese Maxey on the floor or a Jordan Niang on the floor? Like, why would you? But the answer is that you want Embiid at least being put in, hey, he's got to switch. He's got to move his feet. He's got to come out to the perimeter. Maybe he takes a couple bangs. Maybe he can't just, once the ball goes up, start running down the floor, because this is like Philadelphia has been like 100th percentile transition offense through 2 games.
Right.
And a lot of that is, some of it's Maxey for sure, but a lot of it is Embiid is not being challenged to be the first guy down the floor.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's completely fair. And I think that's the only thing you can really do against him is take away the easy ones. Foul him if he gets too close to the hoop. Bump him as much as physically possible. I mean, look, if we're looking at individual matchups, who's done the best job just taking on the primary assignment of guarding?
I think Precious.
Okay. Yeah.
It's been a little.
Precious did better in game 1. Kem did better in game 2.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. Now, the part of the issue there is that one of those guys presents at least a little bit of an offensive threat.
Yeah,
and
you're talking about Precious.
They're not respecting either of them. Like, they do not care if either of those guys are screening or rim running or whatever. There's a reason Precious has got 17 field goal attempts in 58 minutes, and they're willing to let him do that. They just And credit to Precious, the couple of field goals he has made have been pretty impressive ones.
That one play
he's
where
had some
drove
great
out
ones.
The baseline, attacked Embiid, and then dunked the ball. I was like, wow, that's really, really nice. But I need that like once a quarter.
Yeah, and Kem Birch just isn't going to shoot a lot, right? Like, he's taken
He finally hit the corner 3.
He did. Nice, and a night when no one else was hitting threes except OG. So, okay, so that's the Embiid thing. And then the next thing we have to choose is, who is your priority 2, Harden or Maxey? And even though Maxey is averaging over 30 points a game in this series with lethal efficiency, it's James Harden. I don't think, I don't want to answer for you, but are you coming off of what's been a clear priority to get the ball out of James Harden's hands?
Yes, I am.
You're coming off of that. You're going to make James Harden beat you more as a scorer.
Yes, because I still haven't seen him do that to the Raptors. I think that's the big adjustment.
In one-on-one coverage. Like, we haven't seen him face one-on-one other than, the odd rip through or step back.
Yeah, like, he could totally beat you, right? First off, he's had 3 step back jumpers against Gary Trent Jr., who, by the way, has just not affected him. He might be a little too small for him anyway.
Yeah. You want OG on Harden?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I want OG on Harden. I want him to. Actually, the tricky thing with Harden is it's very hard to just stop him like individually. He's a very, very smart player, right? So if, for example, let's say, he's playing pick and roll with Joel Embiid, that prevents a whole issue for you. So what are you really going to do against that? I think the Raptors' best bet probably to switch those, especially if Kem's not on the floor, because what they're doing right now is the Sixers are realizing, the Raptors are not going to help off of Embiid ever. So if he comes off a screen, his man is not going to slide over, take a step to maybe cut off the driver or whatever, or maybe come out and contest the three. Not really taking pull-up threes like that anyway. But like they're basically not going to help off of Embiid at all because they're so afraid of him. Because if you do help off of him, he can roll, he can get deeper position. There's just real issues. So you have to stay with him. So then you're always getting a free run to the basket, either with Maxey or with Harden when you play that strategy with Embiid. So I think switching probably makes the most sense there.
Yeah, and what we've seen with the Harden thing is, though, that pinching at the free throw line or the help off the strong corner just has not been attentive enough. Like it's been a little bit too much ball watching.
He's also passing really early too. Yeah, which really helps.
And he's such a good, obviously James Harden is a good passer. That doesn't really need to be said, but he puts every pass in the shooting pocket. Tobias Harris has not had to move at all this series to get his buckets. Like Harden is making life easy for guys like that. So yeah, I think, you putting OG on Harden does allow you to switch that, because probably OG and Precious, maybe Scotty, if he plays, are the guys that you would be like, okay, I trust that. I'm okay with that matchup on Harden, and I'm okay with that matchup on Embiid. I don't think you want Siakam in those situations, even though he could probably handle it, just for the risk of foul trouble, and because Siakam is your best defensive player when it comes to those help assignments and flying around a little bit, and whether it's helping at the rim or doubling from unconventional angles and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree with you. OG on Harden, Precious on Embiid, and you switch where you can, and then it's just on. It's on Fred and Pascal to execute the help stuff effectively. And yeah, I don't know if Gary's going to play tomorrow night. I don't know what you're going to get out of him, but I'm sure you've noticed that, especially in semi-transition when the Raptors can't pick their matchups, they're hunting Trent.
Yeah, no, they are. And that's the thing. For me, if he's not like 100%, you got to change it up. You got to put as much size on the floor as possible. I know you already lost Scotty's one of those cheat codes where he can run the point for you a little bit. He can do a little scoring for me. You can play in different positions, but ultimately he's still going to be 6'9" with huge wingspan, right? Other guys on the team don't have that kind of flexibility, but ultimately you need to put as much size on the floor as possible. What I really wanted to see from game 2 was like a real defensive, gritty kind of game. Game ends in the 90s, and maybe the Raptors are close at the end of the game to steal it, right? That didn't happen. The Sixers got...
their offense was in the 90s. They got half of it, right?
Yeah, that was real tough. They had a 15-0 run at the end there, Blake.
Yeah, and they only needed one more 15-0 run to come back.